Let's start today with the truth that no politician will ever say out loud. The United States is broke. Not like kind of broke, not just a little bit in debt. I mean, we are $34 trillion underwater. That's a 34 followed by 12 zeros if you didn't know. If you spent $1 every single second and never slept, it would take you over 1 million years to spend $34 trillion. And yet, we've managed to rack that up in literally just a few decades. Now, here's the scary part. That number is going up every second. Right now, literally while you're watching this, the US debt clock is climbing. You can go watch it online right now, tick like a time bomb. I want to figure out, how did we get here? Well, it's not that complicated. It's just really, really bad math on repeat. In 2025 alone, the federal government collects about $5 trillion in tax revenue. That's our income. But right now we're spending about $7 trillion. So every year we dig ourselves $2 trillion deeper, year after year, with no plan to stop. Let's put that into personal terms for you. I want you to imagine for a minute you have a $50,000 a year job, but every year you spend $70,000 a year and you put it all on credit cards. Then the next year you spend $75,000, then $80,000, and you never pay anything off. You just made minimum interest payments. That's the United States for you. Now factor in this. We're paying over $1 trillion a year in interest alone. And that interest doesn't shrink. It actually compounds. So the more you borrow, the more interest we pay, and the more we need to borrow just to keep up with the interest we need to pay. That's called a debt spiral. And here's where most Americans don't understand it or don't get it. This isn't just a big budgeting issue. This is a structural failure baked into the system itself. We're not a nation that's overspending once in a great mood or once in a while. We are literally built to overspend forever. And the only reason the system hasn't collapsed yet, I got one word for you: inflation. Now let's kill a myth right now. Inflation isn't a surprise. It's not a bug in the system. It's not something that the government is trying to quote unquote get under control. Inflation is the strategy. Let me show you why. Let's say, for example, you buy a home for $400,000. You get a 30-year fixed mortgage. At the time, it feels like a lot of debt. And I want you to fast forward now 20 years. Thanks to inflation, your salary has now doubled. Prices on everything have tripled, but your monthly mortgage payment on a fixed rate, it's still the same. So compared to your new income, that $400,000 debt starts to feel tiny because you're paying it back with inflated dollars that are worth less than when you borrowed them originally back years ago. This is exactly how the game works, and the US government plays it on a godly level. They owe $34 trillion today, but if they can stretch that debt over 30 years or 40 years and inflate the currency every year by 2, 3, 4, 5%, then they're effectively paying back their massive debts with watered down dollar bills. Inflation becomes a silent tax, not on the rich, but on you. Every time your grocery bill goes up, every time your rent jumps, every time you see that you're saving money to buy less, that's inflation at work. And while it crushes the middle class, the government quietly celebrates because they just made their debt a little smaller, and you didn't even know about this, and you didn't have to vote on it. And that's why inflation isn't going away, because it can't. If inflation stops, the math breaks. So now I want to explore the moral option, the one that the media would sometimes talk about when they're trying to pretend that our government is finally getting serious about this. When they ask the question, why don't we just pay off the debt? Let's cut spending, let's raise taxes, and let's live within our means. What I want to do is walk through what that would actually require. So first, we would need to raise taxes across the board, of course. And this would not just be on the rich, this would be on the middle class, on small businesses, on everyone. Then we'd need to slash spending, and I mean brutally slash spending. That means cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, slashing our defense spending for our military, ending subsidies, and shutting down these massive federal departments. Now picture a politician saying all of what I just said on live TV during an election year. You know what happens next? Their career is over. It's political suicide because no voter wants to hear everything I just said, which is the truth of what would need to happen. People and voters, they want everything. They want low taxes, they want high benefits, and they want a booming economy. But that equation doesn't exist. So instead, politicians lie. They talk about deficit reduction, which just means we went $2 trillion into debt instead of maybe $3 trillion into debt. They hold votes on pretend spending bills they know will never pass just so they can talk about it. And when the debt bomb gets too big to ignore, they point to the next shiny object and distract the public completely. Right now, that shiny object is tariffs. Now, as a disclaimer, I did an entire video on my channel you can go check out, which is explaining why tariffs won't work and they won't replace income taxes, but I'm guessing you've probably heard this pitch before. We don't need the IRS, we'll fund the government with tariffs. We'll tax China, not the American workers. Let's just slap a tariff on every import and boom, problem is solved. It sounds simple, it sounds patriotic, even sometimes genius, until you look at the math. See, you have to look back. 2024, total revenue from US tariffs was $77 billion, which is massive. Except for our government spends $7 trillion. That $77 billion, that's just 1.1% of the total budget. Meanwhile, individual income tax brought in $2.2 trillion. So if you want to replace that with tariffs, you need to jack them up 2,700%. You need tariffs on everything. You need tariffs on cars, groceries, cell phones, clothing, tools, toys, laptops, furniture, food. And those tariffs wouldn't be paid by China. They wouldn't be paid by other countries. They'd be paid by American companies who import those goods and pay that import tariff cost. And guess what they'd do to you? They'd pass those costs on to you. Congratulations. Your $1,000 phone on just a 100% tariff is now $2,000. A $47,000 car is now $85,000, and your $100 bag of groceries is now $200 or $300, and it still wouldn't even cover the shortfall. Because as you raise tariffs, imports go down. And when imports go down, tariff revenue goes down with it. So not only do you not solve the budget problem, you kill small businesses. You also spike inflation. You shrink trade, and you still run trillion-dollar deficits. It's not a solution. It's literally a fantasy dressed up as a campaign promise, and it worked. But why is the debt about to hit harder than ever? Now let's make this personal again. In 2025, the US will spend more money on interest payments than on national defense for you and your family. Let that sink in. We are spending more money to keep our debt alive than to keep the country safe. And that interest, it's not shrinking. It's growing and growing at a rapid pace. As rates stay high like they currently are, the debt grows, which makes the interest becoming larger and a larger line item in the federal budget. And it's not just a number on a spreadsheet. Money that could have gone to infrastructure, schools, public safety, healthcare is now going to interest payments to our creditors. And who's paying this? Well, you are, through inflation, through rising taxes, through reduced public services, and ultimately through a shrinking middle class. We are literally renting our country from people we owe money to. This is no longer a future problem. This is a now problem. And the deeper we go, the less room we have to move. Now, I don't want to throw tariffs away completely with you guys. Tariffs aren't completely useless. In fact, they can really be helpful in certain situations. Historically, tariffs in the US were one of the government's main sources of income. But what we have to remember is that was back when the federal government spent just about 3% of GDP, when today we spend about 22% of our GDP. So are tariffs a solution? No. But could they serve as a tool in our tool belt? Absolutely. So what I want to do is look at what tariffs can actually do. Well, number one, they can protect key industries from unfair foreign competition. They can give American companies breathing room to innovate, and they can generate some additional revenue. But, and this is important, they cannot replace income tax. They also cannot fund a modern government like we have today that's spiraling out of control with debt. And they certainly cannot stop the debt spiral as a whole. Even with the most generous estimates, tariffs might reduce the federal deficit by 1 or 2 percentage points, but that's like throwing a glass of water maybe at a forest fire. So let me be clear, tariffs are not a cure, but they're not the enemy either. We can't say that they suck and they won't work. They're a tool. But if your entire country's economic strategy is that tariffs will fix it, you don't have a plan, you have a really fancy headline to give people hope. Now, I want to be careful with the way that I talk about this because I'm sure this is going to terrify a large majority of my demographic. Shout out to all of you that watch this that are above the age of 50. I'm sure my mom and dad, shout out to you guys. I know you're watching. You watch all my videos, even are terrified about what's coming next. And I want to talk a little bit about the fuse that's already burning, Social Security. Because right now, over 70 million Americans rely on it or are about to rely on it. It's the financial backbone of millions of retirees, and it's not optional for them. But here's what most people don't realize or haven't heard of. By 2033, Social Security is projected to become insolvent. That's not me fear-mongering you. That is literally from the Social Security Administration's own report that they gave all of us. This is public information. And let me be clear, insolvent doesn't mean that it just disappears. It means benefits get cut. Sudden, deep, painful cuts. Why? Because the trust fund that holds all of this extra money, the surplus that it had from years past, is running dry. And after that, the program can only pay what it brings in through payroll taxes. And that's not enough, not even close. And so what do? Well, we've got a few options. Option 1, raise payroll taxes. Option 2, cut benefits. Option 3, raise the retirement age to 70 or maybe 75. And I'm sure none of these options are popular to you. And none of them, let's face it, are going to get passed anytime soon. So what's the real plan? Well, newsflash, same as always. Borrow more, inflate more, and pretend everything is fine. The problem is Social Security is just one piece of this puzzle. I want you to now add in Medicare and Medicaid, and let's not forget our interest payments. Suddenly, we've got a perfect storm of unfunded promises, backed by nothing but hope. It's all connected. The national debt, the inflation, the benefit cuts, the tax hikes, the market volatility. This isn't a future problem. This is the system we live in today, and the clock is ticking. Now, here's what most people are going to miss with this. This collapse won't come with sirens. It won't be this single news headline or breaking news alert. It'll come kind of like a slow erosion. It'll be slow, silent, and deadly. And here's how it'll happen. Number 1, your dollars will buy less every year. Your rents will go up. Your groceries will get more expensive. Your taxes will slowly rise, and public services will start to get worse, and interest rates will quietly strangle you and all of our small businesses. There will be no big crash. There's going to be no alarms. It's just a quiet decline, and that's happening right now, by the way, because that's the real cost of doing nothing. It's not measured in trillions. It's measured in lost opportunity, a lower quality of life, and a middle class that can't breathe, and yet no one takes the blame. Politicians will just point their fingers, and the media will spin this with all sorts of distractions, and most Americans will just, unfortunately, adapt to worse conditions year after year, not being able to afford as nice of stuff. But you don't have to, because once you see the pattern I'm showing you, you can break out of it, and that's what I really want to talk about with you. When you have a nation drowning in over $34 trillion in debt, spending more money than it earns, and relying on inflation to just kick it further down the road, you don't get a soft landing. You really only get one of two things. Scenario one, inflation turns into currency debasement. The government continues printing money to cover its bills, to fund Social Security, to keep up with rising interest payments, and to stimulate an economy that is absolutely addicted to cheap cash. And at first, it looks manageable. You might think it is right now. The stock market rallies, the unemployment stays relatively low, and your wages might even rise a little bit. But underneath the surface of that, your purchasing power is vanishing. That $100,000 income goal you fought so hard for 10 years ago, it's going to buy you half in groceries or rent or energy or healthcare, all the above. Your dollar dies a slow death and silently. That's currency debasement, when a dollar still exists but no longer matters. It happens in history over and over and over again. Think about Argentina, Zimbabwe, Germany, Venezuela. Just go look it up. Same story, different currency, and we're not immune. In fact, it's already happening. You feel it every single time you swipe your card or give money to somebody at the other side of the cash register. Now, scenario two is a sovereign debt crisis, and this is the nightmare version of what could happen because confidence will completely collapse. Foreign governments like Japan, China, and other sovereign funds will stop buying U.S. treasuries, or worse, they could start selling. This will cause yields to spike to try to bring in more money, which will cause the dollar to tumble, markets will crash, and we'll find ourselves in the middle of a systemic breakdown. The US could then lose its world reserve currency status, and that would be a total reset of financial order, one where our ability to borrow cheaply, live beyond our means, and basically export our inflation to the rest of the world, poof, disappears overnight. Either way, whether it's a slow death or a sudden heart attack, the old rules of wealth preservation no longer apply. You can't just work hard, save money, and retire at 65. So let's talk about what you can actually do. So how do you protect yourself in a debt-ridden, inflating, and volatile economy, which is where most people get overwhelmed, and understandably so? But first of all, the solution is not to panic. The solution is simply to prepare. So here are your pillars of surviving and maybe even thriving in what's to come next. Number one, I want you to understand the macro landscape. You don't need a PhD in economics, but you do need to learn and understand some of the basics. Inflation isn't going away. It's built in our economy. The debt isn't getting paid. It will keep growing. The system rewards those who own assets, not those who hold cash. I want you to study the signals. Treasury yields, M2 money supply, central bank policy, CPI versus real inflation, and geopolitical tensions, especially the U.S. debt diplomacy. Because the game is being played in public, you just have to know where to look. Number two, I need you to own hard assets. In every currency collapse in history, one rule holds true. Tangible beats digital. Assets with real, irreplaceable value, like gold and silver, productive land, cash-flowing real estate, energy infrastructure like oil or utility companies, commodities themselves like gold and silver, they don't vanish when a central bank panics. They preserve value and sometimes even multiply it while all this paper money burns away. Number three, you need to create multiple streams of income, and this is no longer optional in today's society. If you currently rely on one paycheck or one type of job, you're currently exposed and you should be worried. You need resilient income. Now that could mean digital businesses, that could mean service arbitrage, high demand freelancing skills, dividend stocks or REITs, peer-to-peer lending if you're being careful with it, or rental properties or other asset leasing. Because when inflation spikes or markets drop, income is your number one lifeline. Number four, I need you to reduce your exposure to fragile systems. Ask yourself, what happens if your bank freezes withdrawals for 48 hours? What happens if Treasury bonds lose 20% of their value over the course of the next month? What happens if layoffs hit your current sector and boom, your job is gone? Start taking action now. Spread your savings across multiple banks and multiple custodians. Keep some emergency cash outside of the system in your own home. Own physical metals in your possession, not in some paper vault, and consider international brokerage accounts or some sort of multi-currency wallet to spread out yourself. learn skills that are portable, digital, and high leverage. Number 5, prepare mentally and socially, because this one's overlooked, but it's massive. Because in a downturn, people who thrive don't just have the resources, they have the clarity. They've not panicked, they're poised. They see the chaos, but they see opportunity. They build a circle around them. So I want you to be around people who talk about asset allocation, privacy, and sovereignty. They talk about, how to structure deals. They talk about the macro signals. They talk about real productivity, not just the sports or Netflix or the weather. You need a community of builders, not just spectators, because the old system is not coming to save you, but you can build a new one around you, around yourself, and most importantly, around your family. Now, in the bigger picture, this is the greatest transfer of wealth in our lifetime. Let me say this clearly. Every major crisis in history has minted a new class of millionaires and billionaires. While most people panic, they contract, and they freeze up and huddle up, a small group of people, you, will watch the pattern and move. They buy distressed assets. They front-run inflation when they know it's going to be coming. They acquire cash flow, and they build long-term asymmetric bets to protect themselves. This is how generational wealth is made. Not during the boom, during the breakdown when everybody else is panicking. Now, this was your breakdown of the 2025 debt crisis and how it could unravel and how you can prepare. But if you really want to position yourself in a smarter way, the next thing you should do is watching my recent video, Is Donald Trump Intentionally Crashing the Stock Market? Because it's not just about this national debt that we can't repay, it's about market manipulation and timing and the narratives in the news and what to actually look for if you want to protect and multiply your money in a very volatile world. That video is going to show you, first of all, what to watch for in the next 6 to 12 months, like what signals actually matter, and how to structure your portfolio before the next big moves happen. Because panic right now, guys, is not a strategy. Preparation is. So if you could, hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and share it with someone who currently thinks the government is coming to save them. Then go watch my recent video, Is Donald Trump Intentionally Crashing the Stock Market? Watch, learn, and move. Because the system may be broken, but you don't have to be. We'll see you on the next one.